Okay, we are live. Welcome to TradeView Live, everyone, to our fourth edition, our fourth episode. We took a week off last week just based on how crazy everything has been and how busy we've been. Thank you for all the requests. Thank you for all the interest. And we will consider resuming at a weekly basis. But for now, every 2 weeks, just to capture all the things that have happened. Joined here by our host, Kyle Henderson, CEO and co-founder of Vizion. But Kyle, why don't you explain to the audience, for those who might be joining for the first time, what is TradeView?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So at a high level, both TradeView and TradeView Live are helping to provide more intelligence, real-time visibility, and access to some information that's not really been in market before to help answer tough supply chain questions, tough logistics questions, tough trade intelligence questions as well. And what we're here today to walk everyone through is we got a number of different questions that have been submitted by the team and the audience in advance. And you can even ask your questions here during the live session. We'll work those in towards the end and answer them. But what we're going to do is use the TradeView platform to answer these tough questions about what's happening with bookings being placed China to the US, or what's happening right now with actual arrivals. The port complex in LA had a pretty major announcement that they were going to be expecting 50% less volume in the month of May than they have in the past. So we can kind of walk through like what are we seeing in the details around bookings, estimated arrivals, planned arrivals, etc. So yeah, at a high level, we're looking at trade, we're looking at companies, we're looking at bookings, we're looking at products, and this is all built on top of a data set that's relatively unique to Vizion. So
Wonderful.
this is that in a slide form. I should have hit next.
There you go. But yeah, this is details about TradeView. As I said, we're welcoming any and all interest, product demonstrations, and discussions. Kyle and I's calendars are really booked out every 30 minutes for the next few weeks. So we take time out of our day to offer TradeView Live, which is a little bit of a product demonstration. You're getting obviously some snapshots here describing the TradeView data set, showing you visuals from our platform, but we're also trying to make it topical, as you would, discussing information that is relevant in today's world of supply chain. So a question that has come up often from both customers and prospective customers is, where do you get this data? So Kyle, where does this data come from?
Well, we've done the hard work and spent millions of dollars over 5 years to connect to 270 plus different data sources around the world. So that's booking platforms, carriers, terminals, AIS data, trucking data, rail data, customs information, etc. To then suck it all in agnostically and independently. We don't use customers' data for any of this. And then provide back access to easy insight building tools, etc., to answer your kind of tough questions. But often the question then says, like, once someone gets in and starts seeing this, well, how can you forecast the future? Well, a major source of our data is booking information. So we get booking information from different platforms in the market that is the information about the freight that is going to be shipped, and we get the information at the time it is booked. So we're seeing it 3, 4, 5, sometimes 12 weeks in advance of delivery. And we're able to look at that information, understand what are the trends and changes that are happening in the market.
So the most recent question is, what happened last week? When we originally put out our newest blog post on, I think it was Tuesday of last week, we had actually seen an increase from the week of April 21st until the beginning of the week of April 28th. So it was a minor increase, but it was, okay, is this a sign of things bouncing back, or will we see additional decline? So what happened globally, just for all bookings entered, irrespective of origin or destination? What did we see in the last week, Kyle?
We saw pretty meaningful drop in terms of week over week change. So we had already kind of hit a low going back to the first week of April due to the kind of tariff reaction. Saw a slight bounce back from that, but then kind of holding steady. And again, this is global bookings. So this is bookings from anywhere to anywhere. But this week we saw a pretty meaningful drop, week over week change. You can see the year over year change is a slight bump, but this is a weird week also because this is International Workers' Day or Labor Day, so May 1st. And so you have a lot of different places around the world closed that day or a longer weekend in some circumstances. And honest truth is ocean bookings don't really happen so much on weekends when you look at the data.
Yeah, so definitely a potential contributor to some of this decline. So let's see how that applies when we look at U.S. imports overall. So U.S. import bookings has been a topic of interest, right, beginning with the tariffs, and is certainly something that we can show inside of our TradeView platform. So let's make sure that my screen is being shared here. What I've jumped into is the Data Explorer view within the TradeView platform. For many of our current customers and users who've started a trial with us recently, this is where they come in and try to recreate that view, which is US import booking. So what I've done is I've filtered for destination country is United States, booking date is this year, and then my way of arranging the table is forget about all my other columns. I just want to show TEU. I want to group it by booking date week. So I want to group it by that date interval. So when I look at the most recent week here, and I'm going to select all the way back to week 1 of this year and plot this really quickly in a line chart, we do actually see an additional drop. So here we have the week of the tariffs, week 14, where we saw that drop from 347 down to 290. We've seen it now drop an additional, well, we can calculate the percentage here, but it's pretty significant from, again, that bounce back we saw from 2 weeks ago, week 16 to week 17, to what we're seeing now, which is a drop down to 226,000 TEUs that were booked for U.S. imports last week.
And in short, if you look at this line, kind of, you see what the steady state normally is, right? That first week is an anomaly because of how you did your booking dates range here. It's essentially not bringing in some of that data. And then that first really deep dip is Chinese New Year. And so stuff's not getting shipped. But typically that's kind of the volume you're seeing. And now we're at a spot where, it looks like it's roughly half of what it typically is.
Yeah.
So pretty meaningful decline there.
Yeah, I would say for where we were before, and consistently at 340 to 350,000 TEUs booked, we're now at 226. So quite a drop from where we were before the tariffs.
And so I pulled that information up in the same kind of chart, showing week over week and year over year change, and you can see that decline again. So another 25%, 26% week over week drop.
What's interesting is taking that week in comparison to the year before, it is slightly above. So again,
that's another one of those International Workers' Day type of thing. Yeah.
It does look like, I think overall for the year, we are down in comparison to year to date from 2024. But again, not as steep of a year over year decline.
Yeah, because
this week,
if you go back to the April 1st week, so you have a 16% drop, and then you have from that new level, it goes up about 5%. And from that new level, it dropped another 12%. From that level, it went back up 13%. And from that level, it dropped another 26%. So there's that stair stepping we kind of saw in the chart you just showed a moment ago.
Exactly. So let's dive into that same search for US bookings, but only with now China as the origin. Let me show you how that can be done here in Data Explorer. So just making sure you're seeing my screen. Great.
We see it.
I'll go back to filters here. I'll select origin country for China. I'll hit apply, and we should see the chart reload. Okay, we've got, of course, much lower numbers and a similar decline. In fact, it looks like in this case, it might be a little bit more steep. So from 133,000 down to just 51,000 TEUs in the last week. Certainly an additional decline from where we were before, but similar to what we saw 2 weeks ago, a slight bump from week 16 to 17. And then in the last week, And again, this could be due to the Labor Day holiday from May 1st to May 5th. I think it ended yesterday. This could be contributing to just how significant of a drop we're seeing, but certainly doesn't seem to be bouncing back in a continual way like we saw last week.
And I'll pull up that data here again in our week over week and year over year change charts. So again, China to the US and that story again. So that first week of April, 22% drop, stayed relatively steady at that point. The next week, the week after that, it dropped 22% again. It bumped slightly up the week of April 21st, but then from this depressed level, even here, where it's 22% drop, then a 22% drop, we then have a 42% drop week over week. Year over year change is pretty drastic as well. Again, factor in the labor holiday, but regardless, this is not looking good. I mean, from the implications of this, if COVID had shut down 100% of essentially imports to the US from China in the summer of 2020, we're talking about shutting down 50% of the US imports right now. So, and that might kind of beg our next question, which is, well, this was the cause. When are we going to start feeling, well, the cause might be debated, but I think we could say the cause is a trade war and the announcements around tariffs, et cetera. But the first implication and impact and knock-on effect of that was the reduction in bookings. And the next knock-on we're going to start seeing is things just aren't arriving in the ports the way they used to. And so might be good to transition to that question. Actually, I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, one additional question, and we actually got this from some of the media outlets that we've been partnering with to deliver these insights, is I see that you've seen this bookings decline from China to the US. Can you help me understand what types of cargo are seeing the steepest decline? And so what we do in that case is we look at the 2-digit HS code for the goods that are contained in these bookings. So when we do that, we actually see that vehicles, plastics, electronics, a lot of consumer goods, and then of course the automotive industry are most impacted by the decline specifically from China to the US in terms of bookings going down. We're seeing those higher percentages for where the tariffs apply. I saw a question just come in here. What is the window applied to this?
Yeah, the time window. So this is a drop, but it's a drop since the beginning of April. Let's say we'll send this question to the back room real quick and see if we can get the answer surfaced for that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is looking at the most recent week, but we might be comparing a larger date period of before and after. But my guess would be that this is comparing the week before last to the most recent week that ended on Saturday.
Okay, while that answer is being surfaced for us so we can share with you, let's move on to the next question. All right, so how are current bookings from China expected to shape container arrivals into the US in the coming weeks? So this is an interesting one. So it's one thing to have the booking, right? You know that there's an order placed to move freight. But those bookings have estimated arrival dates for these volumes, et cetera. So if we start charting out into the future, those volumes of estimated arrivals, what do we start seeing? And here we have 2022, 2024, and 2023 based on booking data to be able to see what is happening here. And again, that we see a steep decline, but we're seeing this in all those charts previously. We're showing week 18 was the last date, but looking at week 19 to 21 to 23, and then here probably going out to 25, this is that 50% decline to Port of LA or Long Beach. I can't quite remember which one was saying it, but both of them are going to be experiencing a 50% drop.
I think this is likely just the US LAX low code where we see most of the freight coming in versus the Long Beach.
No, this one, because I have this up separately, this one is actually all bookings from China to the United States.
To the US for all ports. Got it. Okay.
I was just referencing that in terms of the news that got put out last week.
Right. I think the executive director of the Port of LA is expecting a 50% decline in the next few weeks.
A slight visualization change on this, just to compare 2024 to 2025 in kind of area charts to get a better sense of here. So we have the weeks 1 through 52 across the bottom, 2024 is this filled in one in the background, and here's 2025. So this right now is the volumes that have been booked, but looking at it by the estimated arrival dates. So, this area is the amount of goods that have already arrived or in transit right now to be arriving compared to everything that was in transit and arrived last year.
Yep.
So pretty precipitous drop. Now, granted, there is an element of where bookings are usually, made a certain amount of time ahead of departure. The trips from Asia to the US are usually between 3 to 5 weeks, depending on routing, etc. But what that means, though, is typically bookings are being made, maybe a week, 2, 3 weeks ahead of the actual shipment needing to be taken to the port and loaded and the departure happening. But this drop off is far steeper than that drop off that you would see just in that kind of time delay between how early people make bookings ahead of the actual departure. So this is pretty severe here at the moment.
Yeah.
Brace yourself. I don't know if it's toilet paper or not, but like it's also an interesting question because how are consumers going to respond to this? Because to that point earlier about what products are being the most affected, plastics, electronics, textiles, clothing, I think two things are going to kind of happen. One, there's going to be a consumer reaction regardless. So, we both live in Atlanta, Ben and I, and whenever there's a threat of snow, even the threat of snow, everyone goes to the store and buys all the eggs, all the milk, all the bread. The shelves are empty type of thing.
Yeah.
So there's two elements here. There will be reductions in inventory and volumes for certain products, likely less diversity in kind of types of products. Like, if you go onto like Amazon or whatever, you want to buy a widget, there's usually 37 flavors of that widget in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
We're going to see a reduction in that kind of variety. But then there's also going to be the consumer reaction of what do people think is going to be an issue and start stocking up on. So look out for your toilet paper.
And I think the other question is just the availability of empty containers where they need to be for either U.S. exports or for Chinese exports, right? So if the volumes begin to drop off as steep as they have, being able to have not just the vessels in the right place at the right time, but in this case, the empty containers in the right ports at the right time is going to begin to be an issue. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects canceled bookings or rolled shipments, basically shipments not departing on time because the container's not available, the empty's not there.
All right, we got an answer to that question of the weeks for this. So this is looking at the week of April 28th to the week of April 21st. So that's the drop between week 17 and week 18. If I'm getting my counts correct.
Yeah, week 17 to week 18. Yeah, so the most...
And we have a question here being asked. Do you see a shift in trade out of China to other parts of the world? Maybe you could be working on a quick data explorer table for that, Ben, and I'll start answering the next question.
Yes.
So that's looking at trade out of China, and I guess we're going to group by other destination countries, and I guess we could bucket it by year.
Yeah, let me just bring up Europe real quick.
Okay, while Ben's working on that, I'm going to talk a bit about also booking cancellation volumes. So another kind of indication that bookings are also dropping off is that you would expect cancellations to be dropping off. But we're also seeing cancellations dropping off at a ratio greater than bookings not being made. So this is also a change in behavior. So if you go back when capacity was tighter, when it was tougher to get a slot on the ship, you definitely saw companies doing hedges where they'd place bookings on multiple different carriers, similar routes, etc. And then they would cancel, let's say they made 3 bookings, they'd cancel 2 of them at the last minute, as last minute as could be possible according to the contracts, etc. But I would assume that behavior just isn't happening because there's no bookings to be canceling in the same way. And there's not a capacity issue per se. I kind of hesitate in saying that because the carriers are doing blank sailings. They are trying to limit capacity to some extent. They're trying to balance that supply and demand challenge when it comes to these massive, massive vessels and these high volumes of containers. But this is the expected cancellation line that we should see. in this kind of an event where there is just far less demand and there are also far less competition for the capacity. Now we should start to see capacity respond in some way, shape, or form, and blank sailings are definitely a sign of that. Ben,
Okay.
any progress over there?
Yeah, I've got an answer. So what I did is I selected for,
and this is an answer for, please excuse any pronunciation challenges I have, but Abhishek Jain. This
yes.
is an answer for you.
So what I did is I removed the United States as a destination country, and then I entered major EU countries. So Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and Greece, where I think most of that freight's going into the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. But when we look at, again, China to EU countries, at least for the ones that I had time to type in, we actually see a very different trend line. We do have the same drop around the Lunar New Year. We have sort of pre-tariff levels of about 100 to 105,000 TEUs booked per week. It does drop slightly, but we've seen it actually quite a bit higher for the last 3 weeks. Again, the most recent week, that drop might be due to this Labor Day holiday. But what we see from week 15, 16, and 17 is a higher level from where it was before. And that is not something we saw in the China to US bookings or for the US import bookings.
That makes me curious, Ben, because I wonder if that is kind of a supply and demand rebalancing type of thing. So potentially those exports got a little cheaper from China. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, like what are plausible considerations? And maybe that kind of drop in demand from a major consuming country like the United States made an opportunity for buying some goods at a better rate type of thing and getting them into inventory and into Europe. Not sure, but just thinking out loud on that one.
Sure. Yeah. We saw another question from Abhishek here. Thank you for setting these in. Are these cancellations, so back to your chart, Kyle, are these cancellations tracked to 2-digit HS code? I believe the answer is yes to that. We don't have that data prepared today, but that is something we can dive into next week, or Abhishek, if you want to reach out to us separately, we can break down these cancellation volumes by HS code.
Yep, happy to do that.
Great. But no, definitely a new look here. We saw Hapag-Lloyd report what, 30% cancellations for exports from China to the US. So I think we'll start to see this cancellation volume get a little bit more unsteady, up and down, depending on the trade deals that are announced.
And Ben, while we have a few more minutes here, I wanted to do a double click on this chart. So China expected, based upon bookings and the estimated arrival dates in those bookings, projecting the container arrivals into the US from China. So this is just looking at any port in the US. I think you mentioned that earlier with this conversation. But what I want to do is I'm going to look at it in a bit more detail here. And I'm actually going to load up a chart this is that chart that we're looking for. And I use TradeView to be able to export the data easily. Oh, excuse me, sharing this tab. I was showing the wrong tab. Sorry about that.
So this is the TEUs that will be arriving, not just into the US overall, but broken down by individual port.
Yeah, so this is the chart we saw here, but we started then segmenting it by certain destination UN load codes. So if we look at China to US LAX, here are the numbers, but we're starting to look at it as a chart as well. So that comment about 50% drop seems on point. Similar, I don't think I've made the chart for US LGB real quick, but let's just do this real quick right here. We'll insert, let's make a chart. Let's make this a area chart. Let's say that use row 1 as headers, and we'll get rid of a few of these, and we'll just look at the volumes, and we'll just look at 2024 compared to 2025 so far for ease. Okay, so getting this chart built up here, and this is going to US Long Beach. So quick mark here, just so we can see the data labels. That's the actual TEU volumes per week we see in the booking data we have access to. So a similar pattern there. And then I can come over here and look at, this is to US NYC. So this is New York and the New Jersey port complex. So let's look here to see if the chart's doing the same thing. Remove. If I can click the 3 dots.
There you go.
And we'll get the data labels for all the series now. And so similar.
Uh-oh. I think Kyle might have frozen for you all if he's also frozen for me. I can't confirm, but.
Oh, I see you're back. Am I back?
Yeah, I think you might have frozen for a second.
Okay, yeah, so similar drop for US NYC, and we're going to be putting out some charts also for Savannah, Seattle, Tacoma, and currently working on.
Kyle, you froze again.
Hello.
There we go. You said currently working on.
Currently working on a list of the top 10 ports to show these same types of charts. The reality is they all look about the same. It's pretty.
It will be interesting to see this by HS code as well. But I understand how that volume is sort of being, the decline is somewhat distributed evenly, but I wonder if the decline is going to be more prominent.
Yeah, like our textile heavier to one port or another type of thing, or vehicles could, vehicle parts, automobile parts. I can tell you, I have a classic Volkswagen camper, and I was having to order some new parts, and I am getting whooped by the increases in the prices because many of these things are manufactured in China nowadays.
Yeah. Well, if you have any advice for Kyle on sourcing Volkswagen 1980s camper parts, please reach out. But also reach out if you're interested in talking about TradeView. We'll welcome both types of comments. Thank you all for taking the time today. Again, continue to share us ideas for what you want to see in the next edition of TradeView Live. And if you want access yourself to the TradeView platform, please reach out. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.